So an announcement, there is this Saturday at Green Gulch, I'm leading the Everyday Zen sitting. You could sign up if you'd like to come in person at Green Gulch, which what a great way to spend a day. You can sign up on the Everyday Zen website. You can also do it hybrid on Zoom. So great way to spend Saturday. Yeah.
I just wanted to announce on Sunday at 10 o'clock at Yalupa, we're going to have a Doan Rio training. So you can contact me if you need more information.
And Doan Rio is learning the bells and the gongs and all the Zen stuff, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with any of this, but you just jumped in with both feet and we're really glad you're here. It's sort of like a sing-along. You just kind of do what everybody else is doing. So we began on Tuesday, next couple of months, there is a fascicle by Dogen, who's the founder of this lineage, called the Tenzo Kyokan. Some of us just got back from Tassajara, and in the Tassajara kitchen, part of the morning ritual is that you chant part of the Tenzo Kyokan. And then you chop the carrots and you cook the soup and you do all those things. I don't know if they do it at Green Gulch. I bet. Wouldn't be surprised if they do. So on Tuesday, I'm not going to go over this again today. We talked a little bit about Dogen's Pure Standards for the Zen Community, the translation of the Eihei Shinji. For people who went down to Tassajara, you got a list of pure standards about ways to live in harmony with each other in this deep valley, adapted for this time, because it would be silly to tell you how to behave in ancient Zen monasteries. But what's the heart of it? What's the pure standard of it? And the Tenzo Kyokan is the first chapter in here. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to put that away, and this book called How to Cook Your Life from the Zen Kitchen to Enlightenment, Dogen's Classic Instructions for the Zen Cook, the Tenzo Kyokan, with a commentary by Kosho Uchiyama Roshi, is going to be largely the guide we're using. Uchiyama Roshi was the teacher of Shohaku Okamura, who does a lot of the translations that we really respect and use. So I'm going to jump a little into that today. But on Tuesday, I brought Ed Brown's bread book. And today, I brought the Tassajara recipe book. At least we get too heady or too far away from ourselves. And I was thinking, I want to look, I know it's someplace on the shelves, I couldn't find it this morning, is Deborah Madison, who founded Green's Restaurant and who is one of the well-known cooks that Zen Center produced out of really the Tenzo Kyokan, taking care of food and how do you take care of the kitchen. She wrote an autobiography in the last year or two, and I haven't read it, so it'll be, I'll bring that here too. Okay, I'm going to read you one part, and then I hadn't meant to do this, but Erica's here, and so I have to tell my story again, our personal Tenzo story. But I'll start with from How to Cook Your Life, the translator's introduction. The following text of the Tenzo Kyokan, or as I have entitled it in English, Instructions for the Zen Cook, was written over a period of years by Eihei Dogen Zenji, 1200 to 1253. He wrote this, I think, when he was 37 years old. Who was intimately familiar with both the Rinzai and Soto schools of Zen and finally completed this in 1237, so he was 37. More specifically, it was written for Dogen's immediate disciples living with him in a monastery in medieval Japan. Makes sense? That's where he was, that's where he lived, that's who you write to, right? Now, what possible connection could a text written for a group of monks some 750 years ago have for present-day European and Americans, neither living in a monastery nor particularly familiar, maybe not even particularly interested, although you're here, with a society or a way of looking at life which differs totally from our modern Western societies? That is the question to which Uchiyama Roshi addresses himself when he writes the commentary for this, and which we'll be addressing ourselves. It's always our question, what does this have to do with anything? And what does this have to do with the heart of practice? And what does this have to do, for me, with the Bodhisattva vows, which is living for and with all beings? What does this have to do with anything? Okay. So now I'm going to tell a story just because I love to tell this story. I think it's such a great story. Maybe you won't, but I'm clearly going to enjoy myself. So we do and have been doing for years in Aravaipa Canyon, which is in Tucson, Arizona, a sesshin, deep in the valley, and it's in an old ranch house. And for years we had someone lived up the road who was a caterer, who we would hire, and she would come in and do the food. And it was really good food. How many of you know this story? A few, not some, yeah, well, okay, it doesn't hurt. So she, I think, got hired away for more money or something like that. Things like this happen. And so Mary Koopman, who organizes the retreat, put an ad looking for someone to run the kitchen for this little retreat. And she got some responses, and she hired this person, and this person showed up and brought all the ingredients and was in the kitchen, and everything looked like it was just fine. And as I remember it, because Zen schedules, you look at your, there's a schedule, and I think it was about dinner time, and dinner time was profoundly not happening. It was like, whoops. So we went in the kitchen. She wasn't there. We went looking for her and found her asleep on her bed, and she did seem to have some substance issues. So being Zen good people, we talked about how could we save her? and what should we do? And finally decided that it was kindest to everybody to say thank you very, very much. But then there we were. We had all the ingredients, and that was it. So the people in the retreat, Erica, I'm telling the story, you may remember it really differently, is we all kind of gathered around the cutting table in the kitchen, and we all just kind of looked at each other. And it was quiet, and it was still, and nothing was happening. And then as I remember it, Erica, who's on screen, member of our Sangha, said, I'll do it. She just completely, fully stepped in. And then what she did is she went into the pantry where all the food was, and she brought it all out, and she put it on this inner cutting it was like an inner island in the kitchen. She put it all out and started arranging it by meals, not what the other person had thought, because we had no idea what this other person had been thinking, but arranging it by meals, and then just set to work. And we all must have come up with something simple for dinner. We went to the meditation hall, and we just went on, and it just hummed like milk and honey, and took care of each other. And Erica has been doing that ever since, and the working in the kitchen is a joy. It just always has been. And I think maybe, Erica's practiced for a long time, and she brings that heart, but it's also in just stepping forward and saying, yes, I will. It's like she just stepped in and she took it on wholeheartedly. So that's anyway, great story, huh?
Yeah.
It brings ancient monastic Japan right here, and moment after moment, it's like, okay, what's needed? What can we do? Sometimes one person steps forward, sometimes another. So having said all that, I'm going to go to the Tassajara recipe book. Ed Brown, who learned how to cook in the Tassajara kitchen. I told some great stories from the bread book on Tuesday, but let me read you some of what he says in the introduction to the cooking book. Tassajara is a Zen Buddhist meditation center open to visitors in the summer. The autumn, winter, and spring months are a time of solitude, of retreat, with 30, perhaps 40 residents and no visitors. It closes for practice period. Turns into a monastery is what happens. Each day seeking the way to live fully, seeking the way to untangle the tangle within and without. Isn't that great? I love that phrase, untangling the tangle. We all got them. Seeking how to realize and express the deepest truth in everyday ways. Guests traveling the long road find themselves remote and distant from the anxieties and turmoil of the daily grind, because there you can relax and swim, and hot baths and steam rooms, and if you want, you can go into the Zendo. It's enough just to be there. To walk, to read, to breathe easily, to rest assured, and of course, to eat, which is one of the reasons people come. What makes food special is what goes into the cooking. So here's where we get to the essence of it over and over. What goes into our cooking is generosity more than genius, kindness more than creativity. What makes food and everything else special is the everyday caring, considerate effort. No one works this way for pay. I mean, you still might get paid, but that's not why you're doing it. Which is not to say people don't need money to pay their rent, and I mean, let's keep this grounded. But what's the heart that's there to sustain life and the whole world? We work this way because we want to make our best effort. Engaging, awakening activity springs up, is summoned, called forth, invited. The guests, the whole world is waiting. The most striking sound is wood on wood, intermittent, the signal for people to gather for meditation or whatever it is that we do, sitting quietly together on black cushions, breathing. Facing the wall. Well, here we don't face the wall. We do it on longer retreats, but here we face in on our weekly sits. Coming to grips, getting a handle on what it is like to be alive and somewhat awake at 5 a.m. in the morning in this case. But I think we could say that most any time. Tassajara is a peaceful place, a safe place to regulate, take off the blinders and unpack the saddlebags, to make oneself at home with whom one is, settling into the depths, falling right through the depths, awakening in the moment. How is it after all? And he closes this introduction with this little kind of gata. The truth is, you're already a cook. Nobody teaches you anything. We could say maybe Erica, but I'm talking about everyone. Erica might have been saying to herself as we gathered around, well, I can cook, but can I do this? I'm not really that good a cook. And how am I going to do? I mean, all those things that we worry each moment before we just say yes, right? And then something in us, in a particular situation, in a particular way, just says yes. The truth is, you're already a cook. You already have everything you need. Nobody teaches you everything. Nobody teaches you anything, but you can be touched. You can be awakened. Put down the book and start asking, what have we here? This moment. What have we here? What's here in this moment in this life? Though recipes abound for soups and salads, breads and entrees, for getting enlightened and perfecting the moment, still the perfect flavor of reality appears in each breath. each bite, each step unbounded and undirected. Each thing just as it is. What do you make of it? Isn't that great? Each thing just as it is. Each ingredient of life. What do you make of it? Okay, so now we're back to Uchiyama. Because what he's going to do in his opening chapters, which is not a surprise, given that this is a Zen text, is he takes us to Zazen, to our fundamental practice. That cooking or whatever we do is an embodied enactment of Zazen. So I want to read you a little bit of what he has to say. First he talks about how hard Dogen is to understand. Let's start there. If you're struggling with Dogen, it's normal. And the more you struggle, the more you'll get tangled up. The more you relax, and we're going to start next week. There's some chant sheets here. We're just going to chant different passages. The way we are going to chant when we do the chants for the solstice service. Chanting is you engage with your whole body, breath, and mind, and you just let the words penetrate you. And then maybe one day you'll say one of the words and you'll go, oh, yeah, maybe you don't even know what the oh is. but something begins to turn and open, some essence, or maybe it just is a yes, I will. So, talking about Zazen, talking about life. This is Sawaki Roshi. Used to say, just sit, that's all there is. And then he would say, no matter how many years you sit doing Zazen, you will never become anything special. That's why I love this tradition. Go ahead, polish the Buddha. I mean, please. We're all doing something because we think we're going to get something out of it, more or less. But the more you sit, the more you will never become anything special. You just do it to express being a human being, to express your true heart. Well, this is Shohaku. He says, Uchiyama Roshi helped me a great deal in not allowing me to use Zazen as an escape. You know, the thing about spiritual path as an escape is, oh, I think I'll go be a special person, or I'll go spiff up this person, and then maybe I'll get out of this mess that I am and this mess of the world. He never allowed me to use Zazen as an escape. He said, you must know that behind Zazen are the teachings of Buddhism. Please study Buddhism. I mean, that's what we're doing. And behind them, your own life experience. You cannot skip your own life experience because those are the Buddha's teachings. And the Buddha's teachings are just a mirror. That's all that it becomes. It's just a mirror of a way to see our lives and to deepen and to say, yes, I will. So many of us know the saying from Dogen's Genjo Koan, to study the self is to know the self. Study the self. We'll talk about that in a minute. Study the self is to know the self. To know the self is to forget the self. The more you know this self, the more you become familiar with having a self, instead of arguing with it quite so much or getting so much entangled with it, something begins to happen and there is more freedom and movement. Study the self, know the self, forget the self. You're not so bound up in it. And the more you're not so bound up with me at the center of it, I mean, me, you can bind up around me, but you. The more, there's different translations, is that the whole world comes forward to enlighten you, where you become intimate with all things. It's like the world isn't out there and you're not here anymore. It's just this. How do you cook? You just put it out on the table, just this, and ask it. What are we going to cook today? And then see what happens. To study the Tenzo Kyokan came to mean for me that I would be studying my own life. It's not reading the Tenzo Kyokan that is difficult. It is doing the Tenzo Kyokan that takes all you've got. And then he goes on, and I think maybe I'll just try to do a little... Suzuki Roshi talks about small mind and big mind. Big mind. He says here, the meaning and scope of mind that has been directly transmitted from Buddha to Buddha, from Buddha mind to Buddha mind, from true self to true self, is the mind that extends throughout all phenomena, and all phenomena are inseparable from this mind. That's really different than my little small mind. My little small mind, maybe yours too, is pretty self-involved. It sees about this much. It has lots of opinions and likes and dislikes, and that's just, I mean, I'm just a human being. That's what I'm studying. Big mind is when you sit down in the middle of all of it. Mind as the directly transmitted Buddha Dharma is used in the sense of a mind extending throughout all things and of all things being included within mind. If you really take that in, your mind already begins to expand beyond the edges of who you think you are. That's what happens when you sit down in Zazen. Is suddenly there's a you who's thinking, who's breathing, who's liking, but you're sitting down in the middle of the whole world, and there's no beginning and no end. To talk of being alive implies at the same time that there is also a world of phenomena in which we live. This is my life. We usually assume that the world existed long before we were born, and that our birth is our entrance onto the stage of an already existing world. We think that, right? At the same time, we often assume that our death means our departure from this world, and that after our death, this world continues to exist. Within this way of thinking, a fabrication is taking shape, which is not the actualization of reality itself. We're constructing a conditioned view, a conditioned world that is given to us by the whole world the minute we come in. The color of our skin, our family, our economic system, the culture. And we completely believe it, although we don't, or you wouldn't be here. There was a fabrication at the retreat at Aravaipa that we had everything under control, and that this nice person who brought all the food was going to cook for us, and then this was going to happen, and then that was going to happen, and then it all fell apart. So then you take a breath. And the whole world, you have everything you need. What's going to happen next? I don't know. Do you? But let's show up. The actuality of the world that I live in and experience is not merely a conglomeration of ideas or abstractions. When we look at a cup, you could go home and try this, that is set down between two of us, well, you could pretend there's a two or whatever. We have the feeling that we are looking at the same cup, right? Though actually that is not so. I find this very, very humbling. I don't know about you guys. How much I assume that when my husband and I are looking at the same cup, that we're looking at the same cup, and it's always shocking that he might have a little bit different view, or that a Republican and a Democrat, or who knows? I mean, a redwood tree has a completely different view than ivy on the ground, but we're also sure. You look at the cup with your vision and from a certain angle. Moreover, you see it in the rays of light and shadows that come from your side of the room. That applies equally to me as well. In a very rough sense, we proceed to separate the reality of the situation by entertaining the idea that we both see the same cup. This is what I mean by the fabrication of ideas. In the same way, we assume that there exists a world which you and I experience in common with all other human beings, that a world existed before our births, will not continue after our deaths, but again, this is nothing more than an idea. My true self, your true self, who we truly are, lives in reality, and the world I experience is one I alone can experience, and not one anyone else can experience along with me. And my own life experience can never be abstractly separated from yours, because we're intricately interconnected. The mind Shin that has been directly transmitted from Buddha to Buddha is a mind that extends throughout all phenomena, and all phenomena are inseparable from that mind. The teachings in the Tenzo Kyokan operate from the foundation of the reality of life to thoroughly cut through the ideas and homespun philosophies we so often set up and attempt to carry out, and rather seek to truly allow that reality to function in our lives. It's about a life based on practice, the practice of the reality of the life of one's total self that includes everything. So the rules that you get, the rules of Shinji, that say, when you walk into the kitchen. I told a story on Tuesday. We were just at Tassajara, and I volunteered to go work in the dish room. I'd just gotten there. Actually, there was a wildland firefighter there that I had seen, that I had worked with, and this is just another story, I guess I want to tell it, that had been there part of the retreat when I was down there in the winter, and he was in the kitchen too. I was so excited to see him and be with him, and we were having so much fun in the kitchen. And one of the people, the kitchen workers, said to me, would you transfer this food that had been the serving dish in the dining room into the storage container? Sure. So I proceeded to do it the way I do it at home. I mean, I washed my hands. I don't like to use spoons. I really like to use my hands, and I try to do it consciously. So that's what I started to do all the while that I'm, joyfully being there with Luke in the kitchen and all of you. And the work leader came in and said, essentially, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm in the Tassajara kitchen. You use spoons in the Tassajara kitchen. And there's a good reason to use spoons, because it's a community. We just went through a pandemic. Let's keep that in mind, not to mention just being safe and taking care. And it's just, the Tenzo Kyokan just says things like, it doesn't say exactly that, but it could just as well say, you know what, when you're transferring food from the serving table into a storage bin, do it with care and take care of the food and the bins and everybody in the kitchen, and then everything will move harmoniously. I went, thank you very much. And I picked up a spoon, because he was completely right, It's like when we do service today. We forgive each other a lot. Because we're all just doing our best, and we are settling into an ancient tradition and picking it up as our own. And finding our way in it is, what is it to chant and this bowing and all these things that seem really foreign? it's really, all of it is really just a way to help us all live and breathe and work together and align our bodies and hearts together so that when we go out in the world and we're in the grocery store line, you know what? There's forms there too. It's like there's kindness and generosity and right speech. How do we take care of each other? That's all this is really training us about, is that we are all part of one vast mind. We are all part of one heart. And we all think we're separate. And we all have our own sense of entitlement. And we all have our own conditioning. And we all have these big Buddha hearts that really do want to get together and help. It's just we forget. So that's all any of this is. And that's what Zazen is fundamentally. It's just sit down in the middle of the whole world. In the middle of your own beautiful and crazy mind. Excuse me, maybe yours isn't, but mine is many things. In the midst of all the emotions that move through, some you like, you don't like, the thoughts, the stories. Ground. Settle this self on the self. Settle this small mind in the big mind and breathe in and out, and then more and more it's just accessible. And when it's not, you just notice, oh, this is suffering. Oh, this is karma. Oh, I know you, old friend. Here we are again. And then you take another breath. That's all. That's all we're doing, and that's all that all of this is about, or any of this is about. So, as always, I want us to have just a little bit of time to talk together before we do service. We're not going to have a whole lot of time. What if I just give 10 minutes? You guys getting 3?